Hey team, before we dive into today's episode, I've got a quick favour to ask. The Women's Football Hub merch store is now live, and every purchase helps support our work as a non-profit championing women and girls football from the ground up. There's something for everybody, adults and kids. There's loads of colours and sizes, and your support helps us grow the game one piece of apparel at a time. Just head over to www.womensfootballhub.com to check it out. Thanks for backing the hub, and now let's get into the episode.
Hello and welcome to Women's Football Hub. I am your host for this episode. I am Carolyn Kent, and today we're talking about challenging young females in the gym. So who better for me to reach out to than a current Masters Team USA sprinter, a speed, agility and strength coach who's just been inducted last year to the Hall of Fame for her time as a soccer player at NCAA Division I school, Johns Hopkins University. She's also been doing this podcasting gig a lot longer than me and has a very successful podcast called The Strong Female Athlete. If you haven't seen it yet, please check it out. Welcome to Women's Football Hub, Erica Mulholland.
Thank you for having me. I know we've been wanting to do this for a while, so this will be really fun because you and I have a lot to say about female athlete training.
Yeah, I tend to find that we agree a lot, and I think, God, this would be like one of those crossover TV series that you get when Law and Order kind of meets up with Grey's Anatomy, but this is your podcast and my podcast kind of meeting in the middle.
Yeah, this is going to be really fun.
Let's chat a little bit about your background for those who don't know what you've been up to.
Yeah, so I like to keep it pretty short, but I started playing soccer when I was 6 years old and I fell in love with it. I was only playing rec for many years up until about age 13, which is very rare nowadays. You see a lot of 8-year-olds enter the travel system really fast, but I just enjoyed it. I had a great coach, so I was very lucky. And during that time, while I was falling in love with soccer, I was also dabbling in a lot of other sports. First and foremost, I had a brother. We were playing in the neighborhood with our friends a lot. Those fun games in the 90s, flag football, Foursquare. We were doing capture the flag, like all these fun games that train athletic qualities in kids. And I think those really helped me thrive on the soccer field when I was really young. And I also dabbled in lacrosse, track. I ran sprints. And I really love those sports too. And I definitely owe a lot of the speed and agility benefits from those sports to my soccer playing. But eventually, when I got into high school, I started to get a little bit more serious and I ended up picking just soccer, switching to one of the best travel teams in the state of Maryland. I also did strength and conditioning starting in middle school, which really changed my life. And part of the reason why I do it now is because I just saw not only an improvement in my speed and agility and going into tackles with confidence, I just felt better overall. I felt more sure of myself. So it really impacted me at a young age. Kept doing that all through high school, committed to play at Johns Hopkins University and had a really good career there and love college, wish I could go back. And I kept up with my strength and conditioning. Then I graduated college. I went to coach in Brazil for a year and also train with a semi-pro team down there. And then when I came back to the States, I was like, I want to get into coaching because I love coaching the kids in Brazil. It was like the purest form of soccer there was. I worked in the favelas, which are just poor communities. You go into these communities and there's like shacks. Some people don't have a roof on their house, but you see these kids playing soccer on concrete on the streets and they're just so happy and they have this just pure joy. And that for me was very impactful. And I just really wanted to get into coaching and working with youth. So I came back, started working with youth, and I've been doing it for 13 years and I love it more each day. So yeah, that's my story.
So let's chat a little bit about that, because obviously one of the things I often saw, and I've been following you for a long time, even since your time on Twitter as it was, but now X, where you did a lot of work with kind of young females. And you probably noticed that young girls tend to underestimate themselves when it comes to strength training. What was it that kind of made you have that epiphany?
First and foremost, when I came back to get into coaching young female athletes, I actually started off for a few months in the skills training world. So I was doing more like technical work with the ball, shooting 1v1s, first touch. And then after a few months, I started to hear more, oh, ACLs are on the rise. Girls are not getting in the gym enough. And I was starting to see, even in some of my own young athletes, overuse becoming a problem. And I just was like, am I contributing to the problem here? So that's when I just left the skills world and I was like, all right, I'm getting my strength and conditioning certification. I'm going back to get my master's in exercise science. I want to do strength training for young female athletes because there is a gap here. This is a missing piece in female athlete performance because girls are doing too much of the sport specific work and not enough development with their strength, their power, their speed, and agility. So yeah, after that, I was like, I need to be part of the solution and not part of the problem.
Yeah. And what did you pivot towards at that point? Because obviously, as a new coach, you go in, you work with individuals or a team. What did you start to pivot towards when you got your kind of strength and conditioning qualification?
Yeah, so I started working with youth. I had always been working with youth, but when I was in my master's program, I had interned at an ACC Division 1 school. And I was also noticing even at that level, a lot of female athletes were not loading enough in the gym. And you would think that at the Division 1 level, like these girls were lifting like 25s on a dumbbell bench rather than 5 or 10 pounds. But even like when I worked at the softball team, I'm like, why are these softball players only lifting 10 pounds for this? These girls should be pushing some heavier weight here. So, yeah, I started to notice that. And I was like, even with the younger ones, as long as you're really teaching them proper technique, it needs to be under the guidance of a professional. My gosh. And we can talk about social media and all that, but the strength training needs to be under the guidance of a professional and progress properly. And that's when female athletes can truly make those strength gains and really push themselves in the gym because if everyone's worried about ACL tears, let me tell you, ACL tears happen at up to 8 times body weight and force. We have to be chasing more strength relative to our body weight on some of those bigger lifts. So that's what I saw happening. So the strength piece is a big part of it, but then also your mechanics, your deceleration work, plyometrics are also a big piece of this. You can't just get away with strength training. There's some strength coaches out there that are like, strength solves all the problems. No, it doesn't. It has to be a full performance program working on all these qualities.
And it's interesting because we bring in the overtraining, and then we bring in the strength and conditioning and the plyometrics and the agility work and all these things. How does a young girl fit all that in along with their sport? Because there's only so many hours in the week, and I've seen some schedules that would put pro athletes to shame when people have showed me how much they've been training. So do you see a lot of that?
Oh, it's one of the biggest problems now is busy schedules, overwhelm parents. And actually, I just gave a week ago my in-season presentation to the parents and families that I work with because I want to let them know there's a proper way to go about this. You do have to continue in-season strength, but it doesn't have to work against your schedule. It can work with. And I always tell people if you're practicing 4 days a week with your team, you're probably good staying in the 1 time a week strength training range for a few months. If you can add a second, great, but maybe do it on your practice days so that those true off days are true off days. The last thing I want is for girls who practice Monday through Thursday to come in and see me on a Friday when it's no, that's your day off. You probably have a game Saturday. So you want to be fresh going into the game. As far as what we're doing, I always tell parents it's different from off season in the sense that we cut conditioning completely because with small sided game design, 9v9, 11v11 scrimmages at practice, they're getting a lot of the endurance bucket. So we don't really need to be overfilling that at the expense of overuse injury, like you said. So we cut the conditioning. We also do cut a lot of the agility because again, within those small sided games that they're doing 4v4, 6v6, it's heavy on the change of direction. It's heavy on the cognitive load too. And that can really accumulate fatigue. So we cut that. The only deceleration I'm doing is very low rep, just focus on technique, single leg plyometrics. Low rep is our friend in season. High rep is our enemy. High rep will lead to soreness, central nervous system fatigue. So we're lowering the reps on pretty much everything, deceleration, our strength, our speed work. We might only do one sprint when you come in for a speed session, but like a really extended warm up. Yesterday, we just did 1 time 30-yard sprint. So enough to give them the dose of improving speed over time, but not enough to make them tired going to practice an hour later. So That's worked really well for us. I've been doing that for several years now with the in-season speed, the in-season strength, super low rep, high intent. And all my girls who train year round have stayed healthy. We have not had any issues. And I'm starting to continuously be more bought into in-season speed training as well, because not only are we getting girls faster, we're also getting them healthier.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting thing that you bring up because I've read a few things recently about microdosing with regards to strength. So tell me your thoughts on that. First of all, what is microdosing?
Giving the minimum effective dose to give some improvements over time without fatiguing them for practice. I usually like to stay in the rep range of 6 or lower for our bigger lifts. Yesterday, we did just 2 sets of 5 for a dumbbell split squat at a moderate weight. So, a moderate weight meaning they had at least 3 more reps in the tank. They didn't have 15 more reps because then the weight's too light. So just keeping that communication open, still slowly progressing within the in-season program. We might do like moderate to high weight, meaning they have 2 more reps in the tank. So I want to still keep loading them heavy, but with not enough sets and reps to completely exhaust them. So we do have to make some form of progress in those bigger lifts.
Yeah, and do you know what? See, when you talk about how many reps that they have left in the tank, obviously in Physioland, we call that reps in reserve. And I use that with patients all the time, especially ones who are nervous, maybe not sure about their own ability, or just those that are maybe variable with regards to their pain. Like, I find it works really well. Do you find that, because obviously when you're dealing with younger girls, you've obviously got growth, maturation, they might be at different stages. Do you tend to find that you're quite prescriptive with, I want to do X amount of reps, or do you sometimes give them a little bit of leeway to choose how many reps that they do?
It really varies. So with the heavier lifting, I don't start doing that until they're finished their growth spurt. Usually pre and during growth spurt, it's more about developing motor skills. So a strong foundation of coordination, stability, mobility with the bigger lifts, just showing me you can do them with body weight. So just basic squat, hinge, push, pull. And then once you've really mastered it, then we can start to give you maybe a dumbbell for a goblet squat or get your heels elevated to help you get deeper in that squat. So everyone's different. But for my older girls who are lifting heavier, most of them are pretty accurate with how many reps they have left in the tank when we're prescribing loads. But there will be some times where I have to step in as a coach and push them. There are some times where I know just looking at how good their technique is and how smooth the pull on their deadlift look, I'm just like, I think you had 8 more reps, even though they tell me, oh, I just had 2. So then I'm like, all right, let's add 10 more pounds on the bar. They do it easily. And they're like, oh, that was easy. And I'm like, yeah, I think it's hard as a young girl to know like what your intensity is, but I also have to be there to step in and help them see that. And I don't think a lot of strength coaches are pushing these girls enough. Too often I see these men posting their female athletes on X, like doing 15-pound dumbbells the whole year. And I'm like, why haven't we moved on to 25s in each hand on a split squat? Because these girls are stronger than you think, especially if they're age 14 and up. You can really challenge.
Now, you bring in 2 points there. One is progressive overload and how much load are you actually giving them? Something that I will say, I think in physiotherapy land, sometimes we get wrong. We don't, I think sometimes with patients, not so much athletes, but patients, we don't push them enough because I think there's that fear of making someone sore. So I think there is that. The other thing when it comes to what you were talking about there with regards to progressive overload when you're working with young athletes is, do young female athletes get treated differently to young male athletes with regards to overload?
I think it depends on the coach. I know some amazing strength coaches, male and female, who do a great job of coaching the crap out of their athletes and pushing them. But then I see some coaches on social media where it's more like circuit style workouts where these girls are bopping around from station to station. It's like 10s or 15s the whole time. Technique's not really there. It's more of a Orange Theory style workout. And they're not gaining true strength relative to body weight. And maybe they're like getting their heart rate up, but that's about it. And I think we need to really fill that bucket of true strength, getting these girls to deadlift heavier, learn a pistol squat well, and then load it with a dumbbell or a weight vest or a sandbag, a front squat, a barbell reverse lunge. They really need to progress these big lifts. We can't be hanging out the same weight and doing these circuit style workouts where there's hardly any rest and then form just starts to decline.
And do you think this is something I've always thought about is because circuit workouts do have their place, but do you think that the circuit workouts are put in that scenario because it's easier to manage a bigger group, or is this kind of not big groups you're seeing this with?
I think you can manage a group and have individual progress programming. If you look at a lot of college strength and conditioning programs, like all those girls have individual cards writing in their weights. I think private sector strength coaches need to be doing the same. I used to work with 40 athletes at a time at a big box facility, and everyone had their own program. And this was 10 years ago when we were printing out papers and we didn't have software like Team Builder or Train Heroic. I use Team Builder because it's just easy. And I know the CEO, he went to Hopkins with me. But yeah, Team Builder has been really great to just have girls track everything, because how do we know if we're gaining strength and improving on those lifts and doing so in a gradual way? We can't be deadlifting 65 pounds one week and then 150 pounds the week after that. Yeah, I think the big groups it is not an excuse anymore. I think strength coaches can really individualize it and track it if they have the proper systems in place.
Yeah, I think it is interesting, isn't it, how people have different techniques. When you're dealing with your athletes, obviously one of the big things was sometimes these young athletes underestimate themselves in the gym. Do you find confidence with young athletes is a big thing you have to work with?
When they come to the gym for the first time, they're a little unsure of themselves, and that could be for a couple of reasons. I think they just haven't developed the physical qualities to keep up with how fast paced and how physical and aggressive the game is now. So when they come into the gym, they really want to get strong and make a difference in their game. And then after we're done a program, they're like, wow, I can actually do this. I can lift heavy, or I got my first pull up. It was hard at first, but it took a lot of discipline and commitment, and I'm capable. And I
Mhm.
think that's where confidence truly comes from. It doesn't come from, oh, I'm great, and all these post-its on the mirror, I'm awesome, and self-talk this, self-talk that. Yes, you want to talk positively about yourself, but eventually you have to get in there and get uncomfortable, because how do you know what you're capable of if you don't get uncomfortable, fail a few times, but then succeed at it the third or fourth time? That's where you get that confidence. So I've had parents, we just finished our summer off-season program, and the first thing all their moms say to me is, wow, like we have noticed a difference in how she carries herself, her confidence stepping onto the field. And that for me is probably one of the biggest wins. Yes, I love improving speed and all these other things and keeping people healthy, but I think the confidence piece is so huge. And I think what's going on there is girls realize that they became capable of something they were a little uncomfortable with at first. And now they have more muscle mass. They're stepping onto the field and they're not afraid to go into tackles anymore
Mm.
and really get in there. So I think there's a couple things going on with that. But yeah, I think getting in the gym is one of the best confidence boosters for female athletes.
There is nothing quite like seeing those numbers rise because you can actually, when you graph it, you can see their progress. And when people say maybe something along the lines of, I don't feel strong, but you can actually bring up the graph and go, that ain't true.
Yeah.
And sometimes what I find is when they say they're not strong, they're actually fatigued. And that's when we have to go down a whole other area of what's your training load like? What's your nutrition like? What's your sleep be like? What's your hydration be like? What's your
Or I
electrolytes
feel
like?
unfit. I'm like, it's not that you're unfit. You're doing too much, actually.
And that brings me on to a really nice point because overtraining is something that I see as a physiotherapist all the time. And I'd imagine in the US, you might see this a little bit more because of the pressure to get into college and how much, essentially, if you can get a little bit of a hand with your tuition fees through a sport, it's maybe worth it to invest for parents if it brings down the college fees at a later date.
Yeah, I think here we are in an epidemic of more. I
Mhm.
think there's a lot going on with this. So I think social media doesn't really help, because a lot of parents and even young girls, they look around at their friends on social media and they have a skills coach, a track coach, a massage therapist. Like they have all these specialists working with them. They have a psychologist, they have a college recruiting coach, and it's, oh my gosh. And then you as a parent feel behind. You're like, are we not doing enough? Are they getting ahead of us? Do we need to start hiring like 5 different coaches? And I get it. Like it's a lot and it's overwhelming. And I also think like you mentioning the college piece, I think that adds another layer to it because then people are like, I'm not going to get into college if I don't work with these trainers and I'm going to get behind. I'm not going to get the scholarship. It's competitive now. But I think the best athletes, and I've just seen this with girls I've worked with over the years, the best athletes do less, meaning it's not about quantity of sessions, it's about quality and intent. So in the off season, you can train 4 days a week, which we do. We do 2 days strength, 2 days speed, agility, and conditioning. And then I give them off Fridays through Sundays. Enjoy the summer. Maybe if you want to do a skill session on some of those weekdays, do it. You do need to touch the ball still, but on the weekend in the summers, go to the beach. We're here in Florida. Enjoy the day with your friends. Like, I just think that it's so crazy that people don't think about the recovery piece. And I always reinforce this to my families. If you aren't recovering properly, then you're not going to show up to my sessions energized. Your output's going to be low. And it's like, how much are you even getting out of it at that point if you are constantly showing up to my sessions fatigued and sore? And usually that's when it sinks in with people. But then some people just don't listen, which is fine. All we can do is just spread the message of why recovery is so important. So yeah, it's crazy.
You bring up such a good point there, because even when I'm dealing with people with overload injuries, sometimes there is an element of rest is rust. If I take time off, I'm obviously going to lose some of the things that I've gained. And is that, I will also say that actually sometimes that can also be intertwined with disordered eating as well. Like I've seen that where you're dealing with somebody who potentially wants to exercise for other means. But do you kind of find that there's attitudes within young girls and also the people working with young girls that kind of precipitates that?
Yeah, I think this is a hard one because I think a lot of girls feel like they have to train 7 days a week. And if they're resting, they're losing their skill or they're losing their speed, or conditioning is a big one too. But eventually, girls will see that in the end, you might not see it now. Like you might be getting away with training 7 days a week for maybe a month, but then eventually, ooh, my knee is really starting to hurt. I have some tendonitis. Ooh, I have some heel pain. I'm 12 years old. What's going on with that? Oh, I can't run as fast as I used to. So eventually, nature wins and it manifests as chronic soreness or pain, or they're slowing down in speed. And now they're starting to fall out of love with the sport because it's just miserable. So it becomes a disaster, and it organically happens when people don't really take those rest days. And I hate that people have to learn the hard way, that they have to get to that point of unbearable pain, that they have to change what they're doing, which is why I'm trying to tell people before that happens. But yeah, it's a big problem. But eventually, in the end, they'll realize that everything will just decline.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. It's something, and I spoke to Rob Anderson about this, who was on a previous podcast, about how many overuse injuries I see, and it's usually training error. It usually is a lot of training error. Now, let's get into one of our hot topics, something that you and I always kind of almost agree with each other on. We have our own little echo chamber going on in the DMs. Misconceptions on social media around training.
I don't know where to start because there's a lot. Here's my thing. If something on social media sounds very sexy or sensational, or there's a practitioner making something sound so complex, oh, fascial sling training or menstrual cycle syncing, it probably is not right. At the end of the day, it comes down to the basic principles of training for everyone. So progressive overload, so progressing your main lifts in the gym, getting stronger over time, training for the demands of your sport, so speed, your high speed running, deceleration, change of direction, eating a nutrient dense diet, but still enjoying and having some balance with it. So you have a good relationship with food, having your off days. I always recommend at least 1 to 2 full off days from any training, practice, or game, and then just getting your sleep. So a lot of those are free. I'm not trying to sell something here. Me selling you back to you, common sense back to you. So yeah, I think if it sounds like something so crazy and fancy, it's probably not right.
I do not disagree with that at all. And I think I did a review recently into like football boots and actually how much evidence was there behind football boots, and see all this marketing nonsense about how it's a touch boot and it's a speed boot. Rubbish. These are all marketing claims, and obviously won't mention any manufacturers just in case I end up getting sued. But a lot of it is just marketing. And I think the same thing tends to come into training. Now, you and I were chatting that sometimes there are good things out there, but they're just used in the wrong way. Agility ladders or ladders. Let's call them ladders rather than agility or speed ladders, because those are the two things that we kind of talk about. They maybe don't train those things so well.
Yeah, I think this is a big one because ladders are perceived as this panacea to speed and explosiveness and agility. But Carmen Bott came on my podcast. She's also a strength coach, and she said it so perfectly. Yeah, all ladders do is really just make your feet hurt. It's like, yeah, that's true because of the way they're used. They're used in a way where it's pretty much the whole session. They're doing like 60 minutes of ladder drills, and it's what did we accomplish here? What was the specific adaptation that we wanted from this? If it was speed, like you're advertising, you're just flat out lying because speed should be very short and high intensity, ideally less than 6 seconds for a plyometric drill or a timed sprint, all out, max effort, empty the tank, then recover long so that you can do it again at that intent. Too often with ladder drills, it's just sloppy. It's just, what are we getting out of this? People are really training more so slow twitch muscle fibers because people slow down after they're doing a ladder for a minute. It's like we're losing the purpose of the drill. So I don't think it's the ladders, it is how they're used. But I also really don't see a need to use them for even like deceleration work. I can accomplish a lot of deceleration work with just more like controlled decels from a hard sprint, or even just plyometrics where we're focusing on the landing and the eccentric part of the movement and being crisp in that landing. And I'm very big on keeping your eyes up on these drills. Too often ladders, kids with their head down, and I don't want that. It's not transferable to soccer. We want our girls to have their eyes up, especially on those landing drills. Yeah, there's a whole thing we can get into with this, but I just think people use ladders wrong and they don't know what the purpose of their training is. They're just doing them to do them. And I always say you want to do intentional work over busy work. I think too often people do busy work to make it look like they're accomplishing something, but they're not accomplishing anything.
Yeah. And again, and I remember working with athletics once, they would do a sprint and then nothing for the next like 7, 8 minutes, like nothing, something's even longer. And I was like, wow,
Yeah.
because they are training pure speed. And it was low reps as well. I remember thinking to myself, I picked the wrong sport here, by the way. Like, they're training for an hour and 30 minutes, going through playing games and then tactics and all, like, corner kicks. And these guys, like one and once, and then they're finished. I'm like,
Yeah.
great.
It's so funny. And that's why I love sprints, because a lot of young female athletes are not getting that exposure with their hamstrings and just that force development from running a max effort time 40, time 50. So it's funny because a lot of my girls from the summer off season group, their favorite sessions were when we went to the track. And I will get my girls on the track, get them on that surface because it really trains those fast twitch muscles and they're flying. So it's a good stimulus to add in eventually. And they love that we just time our sprint and then we walk around the track slow, talk as a group, have fun, which takes about 5 minutes. And then we time our sprint again and we do 2 sprints. It took the full hour pretty much because we did our dynamic warm up and a few plyos to start, but it takes the full hour, which is funny. And then at the end of the sessions, I'm like, guys, you realize we did a full hour here, but we did only really 1 minute of actual work. And they're like, yeah, that's why we love speed days. So I feel these girls crave this because they're constantly doing more in their practice or their parents are telling you more. And I'm here to tell you it's about quality over quantity.
Yeah, and you bring a couple of points there. I think that change of just stimulus from a track perspective, but also just from a cognitive perspective. You've taken them out of that sort of soccer football environment and you've given them something different. Because sometimes you can get into the grind with soccer and you think, and if it's not going well, it can become quite, oh, I really don't want to go to practice today. Now, take me back to the surface change, because obviously track you're okay with. I have a big bugbear in my thing at the moment about taking teams to the beach. Like, please take them and have a barbecue, no problems with that. Running them up and down a beach, I don't like Achilles tendinopathy. Like, and I see a lot of people come to me with tendon pain having had a significant change of surface. Now, that also could be due to the load and what they were doing. It's not just due to the change of surface. But what's your kind of thoughts on that with regards to, would you prefer to be on the grass and obviously doing a bit of track work, or do you switch it up?
I like to be on the track, at least in the second month of off season, just to give them that boost of speed stimulus. And even when we look at the time difference, every millisecond matters in speed, and girls are like half a millisecond off their original time. So yes, they are faster on a track surface. It's great for the central nervous system. So it is the fastest speed stimulus you can get. Ideally, as a track athlete myself, wearing spikes on a track. I had a few girls bring their spikes and they were flying. Like, it was crazy and they felt great. And at the end of summer, it was really interesting. They were about to like all go into preseason with their club teams. And they all were like, wow, we just feel really fresh and energized and fast going into preseason. And I said to them, faster, stronger, healthier. That's the goal. That has always been the goal of this program. And they all go into their preseasons and they're crushing endurance tests, speed endurance tests like Man United's, the beep test. And we didn't do a ton of endurance in the summer, but they all crushed it. And of course, they're the fastest on their team. So yeah, I think there's something to be said about giving these girls a really good speed stimulus, getting them on a track if possible, and they love it. It's just a nice break and change of environment too. So there's a mental piece to it as well. But you're right about the sand training. Not a fan of it for speed. Obviously, you can't run as fast in the sand. You're not as bouncy and springy. It's probably the worst surface to train speed on. So I like it's okay if you are just going for a team walk on the beach as recovery if you're at a showcase in Florida or a barbecue, like you said, or maybe you're just playing or passing or juggling or playing beach volley like they do in Brazil. That's fun. But if you're doing ladders, agility rings in the sand, running sprints in the sand, I've seen girls tied to parachutes in the sand, you are only slowing them down. It's not fast twitch. So sand workouts should not be for speed. And I think people just have to know what to not use them for and what to use them for. I like them as recovery and as a peaceful environment. That's about it.
Yeah. And whenever I hear, hey, the team's going to the beach today, I'm like, fantastic. It'll be a nice little walk, or it'll be some sort of
Just a
barbecue.
walk.
That's the physio's dream. That the minute I hear they're going to do kind of like sprints, I'm like, I might have a word.
You can speak more to just the injury side of it, because I don't know too much about what happens on that surface physiologically. But yeah, if you want to speak to that, because I'm trying to better understand that. But for speed, it's terrible.
I think certainly for me and in my clinical experience, what I see is the tendons don't particularly like it. Now, what the reason is behind that, I'd have to have a little look into the literature for that. But yeah, Achilles tendinopathy, patella tendinopathy, which is unusual because they're not doing a lot of jumping on a soft surface. But there's something about that changes surface. And again, it might be the change of surface plus volume. But a couple of things I have seen. I've also seen people taking people to sand dunes and running them up and then sprinting them down. Guess what? They fall and they break the collarbone.
Yeah.
Like that's just that. And again, sometimes that can be down to, that's what I've seen people do historically. So I thought that would work. Now, that brings me on to my kind of final questions here. If you've got a coach, what is the single biggest change that they could make that you think, do you know what, that would better support your young girls? What would you ask them to do?
Speed training and warm up, just period. This is the first thing I tell coaches to change. I think a lot of the warm ups, at least in the US, it's jog a few laps around the field, and it's what are we getting out of that? So I would say speed training within warm up. So a good dynamic warm up if you're doing the FIFA 11 plus, yes, still do that, but add maybe one high intent plyo. So maybe like a pogo hop for less than 6 seconds. Maybe add some bouncy skips, just working on some muscle memory with sprint mechanics, and then maybe do some buildups at 75%, and then just time one sprint. Have them getting that exposure, even just once, twice a week. Compound that over time. Not only are you making them faster, but you're getting them ready for high speed running in the game. You're helping their hamstrings a lot. And also, girls love speed training. I don't think I've had one female athlete say to me that, "Oh, I hate your speed sessions, Erica." They all love it. They all love it because they can be competitive. If you're using a speed timing system like I do, they like getting competitive against their times. They like racing against other girls. So for like my U13s, my younger groups, we like to race a lot. It's just more stimulating as a warm up. And I think like the warm up is the time for the coach to be present and coach athletes through movements and make some progress on something. Too often they just say, okay, go jog around the field. The coach is like on their cell phone. And it's like, we just wasted 10 minutes when we could be coaching and developing them. So I would definitely say adding a little bit of speed in addition to a FIFA 11 plus or any type of like injury reduction you're doing. I think that's like the recipe for success, and it can take 10 to 12 minutes, no more.
Erica, I could speak to you all day, but I know you're a very busy woman. If people are looking to find you and reach out to you, how can they do so?
I'm mainly on Instagram at Fit Soccer Queen. And then from there, I have a link in my bio. You'll find the Strong Female Athlete podcast in my website. So just keeping it simple. The podcast is only on YouTube. So sorry you have to deal with us on camera.
Yeah, you have to see the whole thing in all its glory. I have to say, though, I would highly recommend Erica's podcast. I've learned a lot from it. And I do find myself nodding along and going, yes, that's exactly what I think. I do love listening. If you have been listening to anything today and you think, you know what, I really want to have a little look at trying to get some speed work into my girls, start trying to look at strength and condition, do reach out to Erica because she is very approachable and she's obviously very good. Otherwise, I wouldn't have had her on the podcast. If you are just looking to look at speed training, please always follow the evidence, and we will see you soon.
Thank you for listening to Women's Football Hub. The information within this podcast is for informational purposes only. No material on this podcast is intended to be a substitute for medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Please contact your doctor or another healthcare professional if you have any questions about anything raised in this podcast.